Mike Golic.
I'm Jessica Smetana.
Welcome to yet another edition of Golic and Smetty. I'm Mike Golic Sr. She is Jess Smetana. And Jess, boy, we've had a lot going on in the world of sports, from the NFL draft, the NBA playoffs. We're getting one of the all-time matchups yet again in the postseason. Hockey playoffs have been incredible. Another AC taking out a one seed that had the best record, regular season record of all time. And F1 is finally back after what seems about a 3-year delay going on to that. I know it's coming to Miami soon, but what were your let's start with the draft, because we haven't been able to talk about that. First, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Mike. I was enjoying watching your and DraftKings NFL draft coverage last Thursday night. How did all of that go?
That was a lot of fun. Again, I love the DraftKings studios because they have snacks and drinks and such. So
any good
I
snacks?
enjoy that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Very good snacks, like the fig bars.
You like the fig bars?
I do like the fig bars. I am kind of a fig bar guy. Yeah. I saw those, and I don't know why, because I don't need to, but I ended up putting 5 of them in my backpack and took them. I mean, is that like corporate stealing? Should I not do something like that?
When I worked at Vox Media, I worked for SB Nation, which was like owned by Vox Media. They had such an extensive snack and drink kitchen that there would be times that I just take home like a loaf of bread, and I'm like, no one's going to miss this. I need this more than they do. So I think that that's totally normal and fine.
You took home a loaf of bread? They had bread there?
I mean, sometimes there'd be a loaf of bread and it'd be there for a few weeks, and I'm like, no one's eating this. I'm going to take this home. They had bread. They had like oatmeal. They had hard-boiled eggs, cheese, every flavor of LaCroix. It was like, I know, you look stunned right now. It was every type of snack food you could imagine. And yeah, I took all of it home with me.
Well, I like the deal at DraftKings where you can do that, because whenever I see the movie, what is it, Intern, with Vince Vaughn and...
Never seen that one.
Yeah, that's the one where they're at Google.
Okay.
They're older guys,
I know
and
which movie
interns.
you're talking about.
And at Google, like, the food was free, and Vince Vaughn was like stunned the food was free. He thought he had to pay for it. That's kind of how I was at DraftKings. There was all those snacks. I was looking for like a register to say, okay, I got to pay for this, and I didn't see one. I'm not going to lie, Jess, I felt naughty. I felt naughty, like I was stealing product.
You know, sometimes you work somewhere with a lot of food, sometimes you work somewhere with no food. Sports Illustrated had no snacks, nothing. We had they had maybe like a bowl of cereal for us. So,
right.
You know, it evens out over time. Sometimes you steal a lot, sometimes I don't call it stealing. Sometimes you eat a lot, sometimes you don't. It
nice.
evens out.
That's nice that we can think of a different word other than stealing for what it is. But it was a great few days there doing shows before the draft. Then we were live on the first round of the draft as well. So I guess overall now we're removed from the draft for a few days. What were your overall thoughts of the draft, especially maybe of your team, Pittsburgh?
Well, like, I have a lot of thoughts on the Steelers draft. I thought overall the draft, to be honest, Mike, not the most compelling storyline draft of the last 5 years. I thought like the last couple years have been like, okay, like there's, last year there was only one quarterback in the first round. That's usually where you get all the storylines. This year there are 3 quarterbacks that ended up getting drafted in the first round. I thought, other than Bryce Young, like CJ Stroud and Anthony Richardson both aren't guys who are going to start this year. So that kind of, maybe not, they might play this year. They might start this year, I should say. They might not be like fully complete, ready to play quarterbacks week 1 this year. That kind of makes it a little bit less fun. And then, of course, like the main storyline was where Will Levis was going to get drafted and him not getting picked until the second round. And that always makes me a little sad. So I don't know. It was a good TV show, but it was certainly not, for me, the most exciting draft. But a lot of exciting things happened for different teams, which I'm sure we'll get into.
Do you feel bad for Will Levis having to sit, because it reminiscent of a guy who graduated from our school in Notre Dame, and Brady Quinn. When Brady Quinn sat there the entire round, actually got moved out of that room after a while, because, I love how people say, the TV cameras kept showing him. Well, yeah, that's what you're going to do. If he's the only guy left and picks are going by and he's not being picked, you're going to show a shot of him. So anybody that wants to rip the TV networks for that's ridiculous. That's kind of what you do.
Well, he knows that. I think there was so much movement with the lines in the sports book last week that maybe he didn't know exactly when he would get drafted. But I think anyone who accepts the invitation to the draft knows something could happen on draft night. It's very unpredictable. You don't know for sure where you're going to get selected. So this is obviously a possibility. We've seen it happen to Lamar Jackson. Also, he sat there all night, finally got picked up at the very end of the draft, his draft year. Deshaun Kaiser, another quarterback that went to Notre Dame, he went to the draft and didn't get picked up until the second round, even though he was projected to go pretty high in 2017, I believe, the 2017 draft, when he got picked up by the Browns in the second round. So it happens. I actually think that I do feel bad, but I mean, like on a scale of things I feel bad about, it's not like the thing I feel the worst about. I think that it adds to the stakes, because if you know every guy that gets invited to the draft is going to get picked up in the first round, then like it just, there has to be some sort of stakes to it, right? There has to be the expectation that this could happen, or else it's not as cool or exciting to watch.
Oh, listen, I agree. And boy, is good. How many pictures went on Twitter of his girlfriend who just did not look happy at times? They took all the pictures where she didn't look happy.
Speaking of snacks, I want to know what the food situation is there, because if you're sitting back there without really good options and an open bar, I would be pretty unhappy too. That is the other thing I will say about the draft as a TV show. It is so freaking long, Mike. When I was sitting there at midnight watching Donna Kelsey and Dude Perfect do like the last 30-second pick or the 31st pick, I was like, am I hallucinating right now? I feel like this show has been on for 5 hours.
Long, Jess, long. Get drafted in the 10th round, and I'll let you know how long the draft is, okay?
Long. I feel like you could do all 10 rounds in the amount of time it takes for them to do the first round.
I mean, it can be very, very long. Again, as I said many times, I was drunk, sobered up, and drunk again before I got my call by the Houston Oilers. But, I thought it interesting that I think it was Will Levis, Joey Porter Jr., and Brian Branch, all the guys that were, I think that was it, that were, and Brian Branch is the only one that came back the next day. He came back to the green room. He said, I'm gonna finish what I started. I'm going back. And it didn't take long. He got drafted early in the second round. All those guys did. Got picked up early in the second round, but he said he wanted to go. I've liked Brian Branch. I mean, not to say that I'm mad at those guys for not going back.
Right.
I don't care. It doesn't affect me.
You don't know what like the flight and travel accommodations are. Like Stu Gatz was putting Will Levis on blast for not going back for day 2. I'm like, you don't know, what he had. There's so much stuff going on. You really don't know someone's personal situation. Maybe his girlfriend or his sister or someone had work the next day and couldn't stick around in Kansas City. But yeah, I agree with you. Joey Porter Jr. ended up maybe being the steal of the draft for the Steelers. Should we talk about this and get it out of the way? I haven't been able to talk about the Steelers a lot in this offseason because they were not a playoff team last year. Almost were though. But I thought that they drafted phenomenally in this draft. And I'm wondering if that's my personal fandom bias or if that's something that non-Steelers fans also are saying today.
It is not your personal bias. I thought they had an excellent draft getting Broderick Jones in the first round with the 14th pick. You need that O-line struggled last year, and you got to help out Kenny Pickett, so I get that. Getting Joey Porter in the second round. He was ranked one of the higher cornerbacks. He's a guy, he's really, and it's very cool for those that don't know, his dad played for the Steelers.
And coached for the Steelers.
And
famously on the field during the 2015 wild card game against the Bengals.
Yeah,
we don't have to rehash that.
That's a cool story, and we'll get to the cool story in Dallas as well. But having Joey go there. Then they got Keanu Benton, the D tackle from Wisconsin. Darnell Washington. That's an interesting one to me, the tight end from Georgia, because he's a big dude, like 6'7", monster guy, and he was playing behind
Brock Bowers.
Who will be the top tight end drafted last year, probably pretty high. He'll be a true junior next year, so he'll be draft eligible, and he'll be gone. He was a stud the moment he stepped foot on the field as a true freshman in their first game against Clemson. Well, Darnell Washington was the second tight end. He would block a little more, didn't get a lot of opportunities to catch balls, but went in at the combine. And again, you know me, I'm not a big lover of the combine, but teams got to see him a little more because they didn't get to see him a ton playing to make them go back and look at more film of him. So he was drafted a lot on potential of his size. He can block. He can run patterns. He's a tall target. So I think that was a very, very intriguing and good pick for Pittsburgh. Yeah, I think they had a really good draft.
So Darnell Washington is a player who every time I watched Georgia games last year, I would see him and be like, who is number 0 on the Bulldogs? That guy is huge, and never expected that the Steelers would draft him because the Steelers drafted Pat Freiermuth just two drafts ago in the second round, and he's kind of their starting tight end right now. But you're right, he's a blocking tight end. He's going to hopefully open up gaps for Najee Harris. I think the Steelers added a lot to their offensive line. They still have some needs in, interior linemen, but that's usually something that you can get in free agency and not something that you'll draft really highly for. Tackles and cornerbacks, that was exactly where I thought they should spend their first 2 picks. And they ended up getting 2 guys that I thought would go in the first round with those picks. And then that 32nd overall pick that they got from Chicago for Chase Claypool ended up becoming Joey Porter Jr., which is, like you said, a great story, and also a cornerback who I think will make an impact. He's going to play alongside veteran Patrick Peterson that they picked up in free agency. So, or at least will, hopefully get some mentorship by a veteran corner. So I'm very excited about it. And Mike Tomlin called Omar Khan a con artist this weekend for all of his kind of nifty trades and signings, which I also enjoyed the word.
There were 3 GMs that were first time had the draft. He was one of them. Yeah. So and a lot of younger GMs out there as well. That's why we had 43 trades, which was the most ever for the draft. There's a lot of moving and shaking that was out there. Yeah, Joey Porter I do like, and a lot of people wondered why he fell to the second round. The one thing I'll say, he's very aggressive, and he can be very handsy, and when he does that, he can lose a guy and give up a big play. So that obviously, we'll see what the coaching obviously can do there to help him out. And as far as the 2 tight ends, listen, I get it. Look what Buffalo did. Buffalo has Knox, a really good tight end, and they go and get Dalton Kincaid, a tight end. So if you have 2, now those are both kind of pass-catching tight ends, but I kind of like the ability to do that and have good tight end, because you can get a good tight end mismatch. And Kincaid can run the middle of the field for Buffalo, so I think that can help. We'll get the Steelers. We got the Steelers out of the way. We can talk about the rest of the draft now. So if you fast forwarded through Jess's Steelers Power Hour, what should we talk about the Eagles next, Mike? The team that you have a connection with, because they basically just drafted all of Georgia's defense, and their starting defense is mostly Georgia players now. The Philadelphia Eagles now are 6% of their roster is Georgia, which is amazing. They drafted. We know about Jalen Carter, who fell to him at number. They went up to 9 to get him, and then Nolan Smith, the edge rusher, and then they got Keely Ringo, DB from Georgia as well, and then they traded for DeAndre Swift. Remember, Detroit drafted Jahmyr Gibbs, which we can get into, and DeAndre Swift was on that team, and they traded Swift to Philadelphia, who was also a Georgia alum. They're the first team in the modern draft to draft 5 defensive players from the same school in a 2-year span. I mean, and Howie Roseman's a Florida guy. He went to Florida. So he's like,
it probably does break his heart. Yeah.
Going to have a hard time explaining that one. To where that goes, for sure.
I heard Bill Barnwell break it down really well on the ESPN Daily, how now that they're going to be paying Jalen Hurts, $50 million more a year because of his new contract, Howie Roseman's really looking into the future at who they won't be able to keep around for their second contracts or to re-sign to these bigger deals. So he's drafting a couple years ahead, and when you're looking for filling these gaps, I mean, you don't have to look any further than all of the, I want to say all, but so many of the top players projected in their position groups came out of this Georgia defense. It's kind of like what we saw with Clemson maybe 3 or 4 years ago, where you're having for Christian Wilkins and Dexter Lawrence and Clelin Ferrell getting all drafted in the first round. When you have the best defense in college football, your guys are going to get drafted really high up, and it is funny to see them all being accumulated by one team.
I thought Houston had a great draft. All that talk about, they're thinking about not taking a quarterback, that just goes to prove that all the lying and BS that goes on right before a draft. To think that they weren't going to take a quarterback was asinine, quite honestly, because they have a lot of holes to fill, but they need a quarterback. So they get C.J. Stroud, and then they pull off the trade of being 3 and getting back-to-back picks of getting C.J. Stroud and Will Anderson as well. So I thought very impressive there. I thought Arizona made a couple of nice moves. They end up getting the tackle at 6 in Paris Johnson to protect Kyler Murray as well. But I like what Houston did because as far as we thought 4 quarterbacks going in the first round, only 3 went. And then Hendon Hooker went as well in the second round. So 5 quarterbacks. But only 2 are going to start right out of the gate, Jess.
Yeah.
C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young, I would imagine, are just going to be inserted as your starting quarterback. I would do that if I were Carolina and I were Houston. Just put them in there. Anthony Richardson, you got Gardner Minshew out there. Richardson, only 13 starts or 12 starts in college. You may want to bring him along a little bit. And Levis, I don't think you're going to put right in there and start. You have Tannehill in Tennessee. You have Malik Willis, who they have as well. So I think 2 will be inserted right away, and the other 2, along with Hendon Hooker, will be kind of on the back burners a little bit.
Well, what do you make of C.J. Stroud now? He, like you said, he'll be starting, although I think there's some concerns that he's going to need time to develop in that role because of the way he played at Ohio State this past season. He didn't play his best game every week, right? The game we saw against Georgia in the playoffs wasn't necessarily the same player that was playing week in and week out,
Right.
But he's certainly extremely talented. And Houston is a team that needs more than just a quarterback to plug in and play, and needs more than just a Will Anderson to plug in and play. And they gave up, I think, a lot to get Will Anderson, right, to trade up for him. So, I mean, what do you make of that in terms of how they're going to be able to now construct a roster looking a couple years into the future when they probably would be more hopeful to be a playoff team? Because I don't think there's a playoff team right now.
No, I don't think they're a playoff team either. They have too many holes to fill.
Yeah.
I think C.J. Stroud gets inserted right away into the lineup. I had him as my top quarterback. I had him just a hair over Bryce Young. Maybe size had something to do with that, more durability maybe than anything else, because I think they're both going to be excellent quarterbacks. There's no slight on Bryce Young. I love him as well.
Yeah, of course.
But you kind of have to make a decision, Jess, on if you have a lot of holes to fill, do you start trading back to get quantity, or where's your line of we want quality instead, or do you try and get both? A lot of times when you try and get both, it can be difficult to do. Well, they went with quality, right?
Yeah.
In getting pick number 2 and number 3 to take care of what you hope to be your quarterback for the next decade and to be the linchpin on your defense and Will Anderson as that edge rusher. So you hope to solidify those 2 cornerstones of both sides of the ball, but you absolutely give up assets to put yourself in that position to fill other holes, which you have to do some in free agency. But I liked their draft. I liked Seattle's draft of getting Witherspoon, the cornerback, and then they started the 4 in a row of wide receivers at pick number 20 when they took Jackson Smith and Jigba from Ohio State. So I like what they did as well. And you think about it, I think Seattle is going to be battling with San Francisco. I don't think the Cardinals are good enough yet, and the Rams are still kind of rebuilding off that Super Bowl a couple of years ago. So I think San Francisco has the most talent in that division, but they don't have a quarterback right now. They're all on the shelf, right? They brought in Sam Darnold, who wasn't injured, but Brock Purdy's coming off, the elbow surgery. And Trey Lance, we have no idea what he is, and he's coming off an injury as well. So
or if he'll get traded.
Issues.
Yeah,
and exactly right.
It seemed like Arizona kind of decided we're not going to do what Houston's doing right now. They have an entirely new front office staff, I believe, coming into this current season. So they traded a lot and kind of didn't make those big splashy picks, but. There is a fly that has been flying around my face for the last 5 minutes.
Isn't it amazing? And you can never get it. You can never get it, right?
No. God.
And it just always bugs you. I'm sorry to hear that. Sorry to hear that. I get that. I'm glad that didn't go over your head. All right. So one thing we talk about all the time with the draft is, as I said, whenever the draft is over, everybody got the person they wanted. Everybody got
right.
Everyone, their guy was always
except
there.
Maybe Detroit the Detroit Lions. I
So here's where we're going to go. That's what's
Okay.
coming up next is questionable calls on maybe picks that weren't, the best in the world.
Yeah.
And also a few draft notes. I always love overall draft notes on conferences and players as well. All right, Jess, so not every pick, while the team feels they got the right person, we as analysts sometimes aren't so sure. And there were two picks to me, and I love the players. So I want to say that first. I love the players, but I don't know about the fit. Or I thought they had other needs that would supersede taking them. And that would be the Detroit Lions at 12 and the Atlanta Falcons at 8. Atlanta picking Bijan Robinson, who I think is the most complete back in this draft. I love him, running the ball, catching the ball. But you have Algiers in the backfield. Cordell Patterson runs the ball as well there. I thought they had defensive needs. And listen, at that spot, at 8, you could still get a hell of a defensive player. So that one surprised me a little bit. Obviously, they loved the pick because they had other choices, but they went with them. But that's the first one that surprised me a little bit.
Well, for sure. I mean, they're gonna have to. He was drafted. What was the overall pick that they had for Robinson? It was 10.
Oh, I had thought if Jalen Carter hadn't fallen to 10, I thought Bijan Robinson would be there, and I thought the Eagles would have taken him kind of as a luxury pick. I don't understand the Falcons pick on this. I really don't.
Well, they're gonna have to pay him a lot of money, and they haven't been doing that really with running backs lately, right? Like you said, they have a backfield that is kind of like older, more veteran players. They don't have like a flashy high draft pick position player there. So I agree with you. It was kind of confusing, just not what I was expecting from them to do with their pick. But then, I mean, I thought like it was weird because the Lions had taken Gibbs really high, and I know that like there was a lot of chatter going into this draft about Gibbs and Robinson because running backs are players that you can get in free agency, players you can trade for, players you can get in like the 3rd, 4th, 5th round of the draft, and they can make an impact that you don't need to use like a top 10 pick for. And then both of these teams did that. Although, like you said, they're both really good players. Like I agree with you. Bijan Robinson is incredible. I mean, watching him play at Texas, he looked like a guy that you would want on your NFL team. And it's just surprising though, because when you see those players go that high on teams that need players on either side of the ball in the offensive line or defensive line, it's kind of like, okay, like you could have maybe gotten them later and still gotten the interior lineman or whatever that you need up there.
Yeah, I thought there were other players on the defensive side of the ball that they should have got. They were 3rd in the league in rushing last year. Now, take out Marcus Mariota's rushing yardage because he's no longer with the team. They still would have been in the top 10. So that one surprised me. And then after being surprised at pick 8, it didn't take long to be surprised again. 4 more picks at pick 12. The Detroit Lions taking Jahmyr Gibbs, who was a fringe first rounder. Again, I like the player. Running the ball, catches the ball extremely well out of the backfield. But you had DeAndre Swift there as well. Your running attack was decent. It was, and I thought they had other needs. Their defense was awful last year. So I thought they were going to pick up some defensive players, which they did actually then. On pick 18, they went with Jack Campbell.
Right.
Now, I covered Campbell in college, a linebacker, big linebacker from Iowa, downhill guy, can really put a hit on you. But I didn't think he was an 18 pick. Now, again, with all this, we'll see in a couple of years, but I thought they could have got him later as well as Jahmyr Gibbs
and then
later.
a tight end, Mike. Like these are the 3 positions that it's rare for a team to like want all 3 of those positions with their first 3 picks in the draft, right? Like it's unusual. Like you said, Brian Branch was the first DB that they picked up in the 2nd round with pick 45, the first non-tight end linebacker running back pick that they made. And then they got Hendon Hooker, who again, like I loved watching Hendon Hooker. He's not going to be able to play. He won't play. And they have Jared Goff, so he doesn't have to play. But he is an older quarterback who generally NFL teams kind of shy away from. Getting him in the 3rd round, it's not like they really, gave up a lot to get him or anything like that. But when they had already made all of these selections before, it then is like, okay, so now you're getting, a 25-year-old quarterback that isn't going to play this year when you have all these needs this year on this roster right now. It was a very strange draft, I thought.
I agree. When they needed so much help on defense, you mentioned the tight end. It was Sam Laporta, the kid from Iowa. So they took Iowa players back to back in Campbell and then Laporta. Again, I love the Brian Branch pick. I'm a big fan of Brian Branch as a safety, or he can cover the slot, be a nickel. He supports the run pretty well. And then Hendon Hooker, the next defensive player they took, was a defensive tackle in the third round. I got to say, Jess, I'm a fan of Hendon Hooker. I think he's going to be a good quarterback. Now, Jared Goff had kind of a resurgence last year, and you're right, Hendon Hooker's not going to be ready to go just yet, so we'll see where that one goes. But I would say Detroit had the biggest kind of issue, I thought, or I guess head scratchers.
Strategy. I would say confusing overall draft strategy, given what we knew they needed going into the draft and what they ended up drafting. Yeah.
Still a head scratcher to me, but again, you see they show the war rooms after every pick, and they're all high-fiving and handshaking and everything, thrilled. And that they're all loving it. So a couple of notes off the draft before we move on. I mentioned earlier 43 trades at the draft record. Last year, there was one quarterback taken in the first 73 picks. This year, 12 were taken in the first 5 rounds, most in the common draft era. Of those quarterbacks, 5 were from the SEC, matching the 1971 draft for SEC quarterbacks. Overall, 14 quarterbacks taken. The record was 17 quarterbacks in 2004. And next year, we're already talking about May, the kid May from North Carolina,
Drake May.
Williams, Drake May and Caleb Williams from USC. And they're saying that will be a better quarterback class than this year, when all they did the year before was talk about how awful the quarterback situation was, and only one guy, Kenny Pickett, went. And wait till Bryce Young and C.J. Stroud and these guys get to the league. The first thing they do, Jess, is rip that one and go to the next year's and say, it's going to be so much better.
Every single year, your son Gojo tweeted this the other day, because some NFL account posted like next year's draft class is going to be an all-timer, and he tweeted like I love that this happens after we've just ground this year's draft class into a fine powder, which is so spot on. We just like take from January until April, saying every single player's flaws, and then are like, but Caleb Williams is going to be, and I guarantee you this time next year, there will be so many question marks about Caleb Williams, about Drake May, about Sam Hartman, who will probably be in the draft. And it's fascinating to see.
All I have to say is, why couldn't Caleb Williams, was it either a groin or a hammy that he pulled in the bowl game? Why couldn't he have done that against Notre Dame in the last game of the season? Again, I'm not wishing injury. It's nothing that really deterred him. Obviously, he missed some time, so I'm not asking for a major injury. I would never do that, ever. At least maybe not. 10 players drafted each by Georgia and Alabama, tied for the most in this draft. 9 tight ends were taken the first 2 days, most in the first 3 rounds since 1967. The SEC led all conferences with 31 selections in the first 3 rounds. The Big Ten led with 20 picks in the first 2 rounds, the most ever the Big Ten has had in the first 2 rounds. And by the way, your Pittsburgh Steelers drafted 4 Big Ten defenders in their first 6 picks, so they went down the Big Ten road as well. I always like a few notes. The one I will end on as far as notes is the story in Dallas. I thought was pretty cool, right? Chris Vaughn and Deuce Vaughn. Chris Vaughn, the dad, who is a college scout for the Cowboys. Deuce Vaughn is a running back for Kansas State. So the 7th round, and by the way, in the draft prep, whenever they were talking about potentials, whenever Deuce Vaughn's name came up, Chris Vaughn, his dad, left the room. He did not want to, influence, the team or anything.
I would stay and influence the team. If I loved my son. Just saying.
Well, he left. He left the room, let them talk about it, and because he was a college scout, so that would be right in his lane. So it came down to their 7th round pick, and he had left the room, did Chris Vaughn, to start talking about the undrafted free agents they were going to go after. And when he was out of the room, they had decided in the room that they were going to take Deuce Vaughn with their seventh round selection. And the dad didn't know that yet. And when Chris Vaughn came back in the draft room, Jerry Jones was openly talking about who they were going to select, and he was mentioning other names and not Deuce, even though they had already decided. They were kind of building the moment. And then sure enough, that was going to be the call. They had Chris Vaughn call his son, and the classic line, "How would you like to go to work with me every day?" I mean, such a very...
I'd be like, can someone else draft me, please, Dad?
Yeah, I got to hang out with Dad now. But I mean, what a cool moment. Even
I know, it was very cool.
Even Jerry Jones said I've been doing drafts for 30 years, and very few times, or maybe never, do I get a little tear in my eye. It was a very cool moment for the father and son. And let's see, he's a seventh rounder. We'll see what he can do, but hopefully he can make it.
He's a small guy. He's only like, I think 5'5" or
5'5". Yeah, he is. Yeah. Reminds me of Darren Sproles.
Reminds me of me because I'm 5'5". So,
I could see you in an NFL
in a Cowboys uniform.
How that would work. All right, the draft is behind us. The playoffs in NBA and hockey are in front of us. We'll do a quick little overview on that.
Mike, we've talked about how exciting the Stanley Cup playoffs are, specifically overtime in the Stanley Cup playoffs. But we have not talked about specifically Game 7s in the Stanley Cup playoffs, which there was an incredible Game 7 between the Bruins and the Panthers on Sunday. Did you watch any of this game, and were you shocked when the Bruins lost after they won the President's Trophy this regular season?
I love hockey. Unfortunately, when most of my time at ESPN, we had given up. We didn't bring them back. They weren't with us at ESPN. Now they are back there, so they're out there a little more. When they were gone, they were harder to find. I love hockey. Unfortunately, when you talked hockey on radio, it didn't do great for the ratings, which bummed me out because I love it. Just didn't. That's just the way it was. But I loved hockey. I watched hockey when I was out here in the mid '90s working at local radio. We had tickets to the Coyote games. I would take the kids to. I loved it, and there is nothing more exciting than playoff overtime hockey, to where you are just playing. You're playing 20-minute periods just like the regular game, and you're playing as many as you have to get a win. So I think that is awesome. And so now we have the Boston Bruins, who set a regular season record, as you mentioned, won the President's Trophy, and then go lose to the Panthers in the first round of 1, losing to an 8, which is unreal. But also the President's Trophy winning the Stanley Cup is not, I think it's happened 6 times in 38 tries of the President's Trophy.
Yeah, so, I think the curse is real. I think definitively you don't want to win the President's Cup. If you're a hockey team that has, maybe you have 10 games left and there's another team with 10 games left and you guys have the same amount of wins, maybe drop a couple of them.
You calling saying dumping the games?
Maybe dump a couple games. You don't want to win that President's Trophy. No one wants to win that President's Trophy. Don't do it.
I think every year, if you're going to do it, players have the confidence that says we're going to be able to win it. We're that good. And Boston felt that way.
And how has that worked out?
It has not worked out well for them.
Boston fans were already planning the parade. They were like, we won the President's Trophy and we're the best team in the league. And it's a no-brainer. Didn't even make it out of the first round. That is insane. And
Boston fans should be planning parades because they've been doing it for years between the Bruins, the Celtics, and the Patriots. Yeah. They've been doing Red Sox back.
Bad weekend for Boston fans, though, because then the Celtics lost at home to the 76ers in the second round of the NBA playoffs. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe a little bad luck streak for Boston is in tow. That wouldn't be the worst thing.
Yeah. But the hockey, so we're getting ready to go to the second round. The Kraken beat Colorado, which was last year's Stanley Cup winners. The Kraken are the first expansion team to knock off a defending champ, or the reigning champ, what they did to Colorado. So, I like seeing that. I just love the Kraken. I love that name. I think it's just awesome.
Me too. Their branding, everything about them is great. And they're a brand new team, and I could probably tell you 0 facts about them, but Seattle Kraken just sounds great.
It's just phenomenal. I have a Kraken shirt. That's the first thing I bought. I think it's phenomenal.
Maybe I should jump on the Kraken bandwagon.
Do it. So, failure or just disappointment? Bucks losing a 1-8 to Miami, and Bruins losing a 1-8 to the Panthers. Disappointment or failure?
I think the season's a failure for both teams, right? And you heard Giannis's post-game press conference that has already been discussed, ad nauseum for days on sports talk radio. But undoubtedly, if your team's very good in the regular season and you can't make it out of the first round, something has gone wrong. That is a failure. I think it's disappointing when you're, say the Florida Panthers, and if they were to lose in the second round, like, that's disappointment. But, being the 1 seed, losing to the 8 seed, which so rarely ever happens, like, that just is complete failure to me.
So now, going forward, what'll happen? I wonder with the Panthers. As far as them, they get that win. So they're the last 8 seed to beat or to win the Stanley Cup. I think it was in 2012 or 13. It was the LA Kings as an AC doing that. So I wonder, where the Panthers will go as they go forward. They play Toronto in the next round. So we'll see. Devils blanked New York in a Game 7 for zip. As I mentioned, Kraken won Game 7 over Colorado. So we're getting the second round going there. Quickly in the NBA, the story, it seems like the Suns are in a lot of trouble, right? Down 2-0 now to the Nuggets, who don't seem to be getting any credit at all for being the top seed in the West. The big one was the 76ers winning Game 1 in Boston without Joel Embiid, still out with the knee, and they win on a bad turnover coming toward with about 28 seconds to go in the game. Just an errant pass goes to Tyrese Maxey, who just lays it in to give them a point lead with 20-some seconds to go, and Philadelphia pulls that win off. What a monster win. Like you said, bad timing in that arena for Boston between the hockey and the basketball and what went on.
Yeah, well, the main thing that we've been talking about here in Miami is, of course, the Heat-Knicks series, Mike. So that's really where all of my focus and attention has been, as someone who's on the Dan Le Batard show with the loudest Miami Heat fans in the world, and not like the best Miami Heat fans in the world, but the loudest. And then, dating a Knicks fan, it's been tough here. The Knicks didn't look very good in Game 1. The Heat won on the road. Now they're coming. They have one more game in New York, then they're coming back down here to Miami. So really, that's been where all my focus and attention is at. I hope the Knicks can at least win a couple games, though.
Listen, they did it again without Jimmy Butler, and the question is, with the sprained ankles, Butler will want to play in Game 2, but do you play him, or do you just, because there's a big rest? They play, Tuesday night, and then they don't play again until Saturday.
Yeah.
So think of the rest Jimmy Butler could get by doing that, if he would do that, and you wonder if the 76ers might do the same thing with Joel Embiid, who has a knee sprain. You at least have the split in Boston, so you have home court. Do you just skip the second game as well? He may not be able to play it in anyway, I don't know, and just wait and get more time to rest that knee. We'll see. And I think the Suns are done. Chris Paul pulls a groin in this one. Who knows how much time he'll miss there. They missed their first 9 shots in the fourth quarter and lose to Denver. So we'll see. But the other big matchup going on now is obviously going to be the Lakers and Golden State. The 6th time in the postseason, I think LeBron and Steph have matched up. It was 4 in a row from, I think, 15 through 18. Golden State and Cleveland matched up in the finals, of which Golden State won 3 of those. The one thing I don't agree with, Jess, is people saying, oh, we got to watch this one. It could be the last time Steph and LeBron meet in the playoffs. I don't know why we think that. LeBron is going to be around until Bronny's in the league. And
it's
Steph's,
it's
35,
like saying,
so.
It's like the Rolling Stones. Oh, we have to go. It's their last concert. And it's like, no, Keith Richards is actually immortal. So they're probably going to keep playing for another 10 years. I agree
exactly. So I don't think this will be the last matchup, but it'll be an interesting matchup for sure. We have plenty of time to break that one down, which we will. But I also wanted to get in.
You said that before we go. You said that LeBron and Steph have played 4 times in the NBA playoffs. I think Steph leads the series 3-1.
Well, he does.
So.
They played 15-19 in the finals each year. Cleveland against Golden State, of which Golden State won 3 of those. So yeah, it is, and Golden State's playing well right now. As a matter of fact, going into the second round, it was actually the Celtics who were the favorites to win it all, and then Golden State was second. So the Celtics already dropped one. So we'll see what the Celtics do here. And again, is there the disrespect for Denver, and where they're going to be? They could end this series pretty quickly now. It goes back to Phoenix, maybe without Chris Paul. So we'll see. But coming up, we're finally back with some F1. So I'm excited to talk about that. And also, not so excited, a little sad to talk about one of the greats that has passed away. That's coming up. All right, Jess, F1 is finally back in Azerbaijan. Did I say it right?
Oh, so close.
What is it?
Azerbaijan.
Azerbaijan.
It
Doggone
was close. It
So
was close.
first and foremost, before we get to the racing, is Fernando Alonso dating Taylor Swift?
I don't know, Mike. I haven't seen any definitive evidence, but that is the rumor that is swirling right now among Formula One fans and Swifties.
Interesting, because she's on tour, and
Right.
he obviously is right in the going on. in
Also
his
kind of
F1
on
season.
tour, yeah.
Exactly. So I don't know when they would be able to spend any time together.
Right.
When they met, because she didn't break up too long ago with her boyfriend. So I find it hard to
Yes.
believe after she broke up with her boyfriend, she somehow met Fernando Alonso and they were able to start dating when they were both clearly in their season. So I'm not real sure about that one.
In full disclosure, I'm not a Swiftie, as we've talked about with Gojo before. I'm kind of a fan from afar, but I am a big Formula One fan. So I've been all over the Formula One side of it and not really sure what her fans are saying. But Fernando Alonso kind of like played into it a little bit during the Azerbaijan Grand Prix weekend. So, we're all having fun with the rumors out here.
Always good with those rumors. Always enjoy that. And before we get to the actual race itself, we were talking about the sprint series that they are using as well, talking about even increasing some of that during the week of qualifying and the sprint races. And they're still kind of tinkering. What do you use it for? How they're going to be points? Does it have anything to do with the lineup on the grid? They're still kind of working through all that. But the one guy that hates it is Max Verstappen. He says, scrap the whole thing. They're talking about increasing the sprint races. He's talking about scrapping the whole thing. Basically, is it because George Russell ran him off the road? And supposedly, well, that's what Max said anyway.
Yeah.
He is not happy with the sprint series at all.
Yeah, Max was not happy with George Russell, like you said, kind of pushing him wide during the sprint race. And had some very choice words for him after the race, which people can Google because I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say it on the show. But
yeah, it definitely went somewhere. Yeah,
he was not happy. But I think there's a lot of drivers and team principals and even fans who are not completely sold on the sprint idea. And I think they're doing it 6 times this season. And as I explained to you last week, it's a little confusing. It's a lot to have to remember. There's qualifying for the Sunday race. There's qualifying for the sprint race. There's not as much time to practice and kind of get the car set up on each track now on Fridays because you're qualifying for Sunday. And also qualifying on Friday means a lot of fans can't watch qualifying in certain parts of the world because, some of us have to go to work. We can't be glued to ESPN. Some of us do glue themselves to ESPN for work, which is nice. But it's definitely kind of controversial. But, Formula One wants to have really high stakes on Saturdays and Sundays. And they think that by doing sprint races, which is a format that I don't think it's proven to fans makes for a more exciting race on Sunday. I actually don't think it really does anything for Sunday's race other than maybe would disqualify someone if they get in a bad accident or something like that. But they've decided that that's what they want to try. And so they tried it a different way this weekend. I mean, the race was pretty boring. It was not an exciting race on Sunday. And the sprint, other than Max and George Russell having a little bit of a, contact and then a verbal altercation afterwards, really kind of a dud. But there's a lot of reasons for it. It's not because of the sprint race. There's also questions about the type of track that they're racing on and all sorts of things. But yeah, it was, coming back after 4 weeks to that, a little underwhelming, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It does nothing for the Sunday race. They're just trying to give the fans something more to watch instead of just qualifying.
Sell more tickets, right?
Yeah,
Get more people to watch on Saturdays.
To watch
That's what
some
it's
races.
about.
So as far as the weekend went, and especially the race on Sunday, to start it out, I want to do this because I love your F1 Minute on Dan's show, on Dan Lebitard's show. So when you do that, and last year you did one, was it in French?
It was in French, yeah.
That was very impressive. This one is not in French, but this is Jess's F1 Minute.
This is going to be a good one. I don't think you guys are ready.
After a blank space on the calendar, Formula One is back in Azerbaijan despite its reputation for tight corners and narrow roads. F1 is putting a sprint race in Baku. On Saturday, Charles Leclerc is fearless in pole position as the sprint begins. But at the start, London boy George Russell delivers some karma to Max Verstappen, making him a move to push him wide. Max is red, but George says, don't blame me. Number 22, Yuki Tsunoda, clips the wall and loses a tire after just 2 laps. At the restart, Sergio Perez has a lead with 5 laps left. It's time to go. Checo wins the sprint race, but Max and George have bad blood when the race ends. You guys see what I'm doing yet? Will there be vigilante shit on Sunday?
This is amazing.
You need to calm down because it's lights out and away we go in Baku. Sparks fly, and Verstappen is driving like he's in a getaway car and pulls out into the lead. Long story short, Nick DeVries has a glitch and a safety car ensues. Perez is in the lead after a slew of pit stops, but he's not out of the woods yet. The one driver, Max Verstappen, has speed, but that's when Sergio Perez says, bye-bye, baby. As the race ends, Esteban Ocon goes into the pit, but the mastermind race organizers have let press onto the treacherous pit lane. This is why we can't have nice things. 7-time champion Lewis Hamilton finishes 6th. The last great American dynasty, Haas, finishes out of the points, but today was a fairy tale for Sergio Perez. Verstappen finishes in 2nd, which is better than revenge. 1-2 for Red Bull is nothing new. They don't have champagne problems on the podium, but the anti-hero Max Verstappen is only ahead in the Drivers' Championship by 6 points. Fernando, Alonso, and Taylor Swift rumors are swirling. Long live Formula One.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. I love London boy George Russell.
I know. I posted this on TikTok, and so many people were like, he's not from London. And I'm like, doesn't matter.
Yeah, never let the truth get in the way of a good flow.
When you live in America, anyone from the UK is from London, right?
Yeah,
like, we
exactly
don't know
right.
other cities in the UK. We're stupid.
Completely agree. So you mentioned Perez, Verstappen 1-2, Leclerc is 3rd. Taylor Swift's boyfriend, Fernando Alonso, is 4th. In fact, that is true. So where do they go next? What's next?
Miami, Mike.
Oh,
They're
that's right.
Down here in Miami.
That's right. So this is a Jess Smetana like special, right? You're going to be everywhere, aren't you?
No, I'm not. I'm going to a wedding this weekend.
Oh, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
Who puts a wedding on an F1 weekend?
We talk about this all the time in the fall, right? Why have a fall wedding weekend?
Right,
But
right.
you can't blame people for having a May wedding weekend.
I know, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
But you're not, because I'm also sad, so it's fine.
Oh, that is a bummer. Boy, there is no other city in this country where people just go somewhere to be seen than Miami. That's for sure. So what a spectacle that's going to be.
I'm devastated, Mike.
Oh, I bet you are. Well, we'll look forward to your minute next week as well, because I'm sure you'll still do one, even if you have to make it up.
I'll still do one. I hope it's a good race. Last year, Miami was kind of, it was excitement-wise. So.
I did in the sprint, though. Whose car was it? I remember seeing the highlight of the tire just bouncing down the track.
Yuki Tsunoda, yeah.
Yeah, just rolling.
That's the other thing with the sprint race being in Baku. Baku is a street circuit, and the walls are really close. The roads are super narrow. And there were a lot of, teams that were concerned that something like that would happen. Luckily, nothing too bad happened. But if your circuit needs a crash to make it an interesting race, it's probably not that good of a racing circuit because, guys are just not passing each other on that circuit. So
they're not.
Yeah.
And that's when it's like Monaco, the race gets a little boring when you don't see a lot of passing. I completely agree. And it's all about, where are you on the grid to start the race? So I agree with that. I don't know what they're ever going to do to change that. It's just mainly courses and how they run. So obviously something to keep an eye on, but I still love watching it. We'll see where the sprint races go. Jess, I want to finish today. It's a bit of a sad note, but it's also a way to honor a guy and his career. And that's Gordon Lightfoot. And I know you don't know a lot about him. People your age don't. Luckily, Sydney does, because I had a healthy dose. Again, my daughter Sydney is Jess's age. They graduated together at Notre Dame. And in driving Sydney to any of her practices growing up, I always had 70s music on. And she is renownedly talented at knowing 70s music. And this guy she knows, Gordon Lightfoot, Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, If You Could Read My Mind, Sundown, Carefree Highway. So many great songs. Canadian singer who is 84 years old. I saw him in concert in 2013 and 2011. This guy was still doing concerts up to this year, Jess. Me and Chris, my wife, were supposed to go to a concert in Arizona here April 16th. That's not long ago, and it got postponed, and we thought, this may not be good, and unfortunately, he did pass away, 84 years old, but that man has been on the stage since the 60s, just an incredible songwriter. If you don't know him, I would say just Google him, listen to some of those songs. Jess, he's a great storyteller in songs. You can just kind of sit back and listen to the story he's telling, and he's got such a smooth voice. Rest in peace, Gordon Lightfoot, man. You were a great one, no doubt about it.
Well, rest in peace. And Mike, I'll see you next week.